When you actually come to implement, there's a lot of devil in the detail of how you actually do that, cost involved. It's not all just, wave a magic wand. I do think that we're in the early days of a real tech revolution, and that over time it's going to transform business in ways that we can't even expect or anticipate today. It's pretty exciting.
Welcome to the AI Grapple podcast. My name is Kate vanderVoort, founder and CEO of Social Mediology and the AI Success Lab. What happens when you blend Wall Street smarts, Silicon Valley innovation, and cutting-edge AI? You get Simon Yencken, CEO of Fanplayr and today's guest on the podcast. Simon's career spans law, finance, SaaS, and now leading one of the most exciting AI-driven companies in e-commerce. In this episode, we break down how Fanplayr uses real-time data to create hyper-personalised shopping experiences without being creepy. We talk AI myths, the future of online retail, how different parts of the world are taking very different paths with AI, and the real risks and opportunities behind the current AI boom. If you sell online, if you care about customer experience, or if you want to survive the AI shakeup, this conversation is packed with pure gold. Let's dive right in. Hi, Simon. Welcome to the podcast. It's great to have you here.
Thank you, Kate. It's really nice to join.
So let's get started with a bit of background about you, just to bring us up to speed. Tell us a bit about your professional career prior to launching Fanplayr, which we'll dive right into shortly.
Yeah, I'd be very happy to do that. So I originally started my career in the law and was a partner at Herbert Smith Freehills in Australia for quite a while. I then went from there to become General Counsel of Reuters in London, which in those days was a 17,000 person company, very international. And in that company, I went from legal to the business tech side of the business. And when I was there, I became Managing Director of Financial Enterprise Systems. And I helped Reuters do a big acquisition in Silicon Valley that I ended up joining the company. We took it public in 1999, so just before the dot-com bubble. And I remember that Reuters did very well because the company was bought for a particular product in the market data systems area. In the end, Reuters kept that product. We created a new company which went public, and at the peak of the market, it was worth $30 billion. So it was a big increase from that demonstrated organic growth and the emergence of the internet infrastructure around that time. So from then on, I've been in the software and SaaS world, and I was one of the early investors and board members at Aconex. I was chairman of that company for 3 years before we moved the management to Australia. And part of the journey that took the company public and ultimately involved in the sale of that company to Oracle, which was a great result for everyone, really. So that was an exciting journey in SaaS. I've also been an investor on the board of Damstra, which was another Australian public SaaS company that we took public and was sold fairly recently to IdeaGen, which is a international software company owned by HG Ventures.
Wow. So you've really seen it all over the last few years in terms of changes in that industry too. So tell us a bit about Fanplayr, what it is that Fanplayr does, and then we'll get into some more of the detail around AI.
Yeah, definitely. So the Fanplayr founders, three of us, we'd all worked together previously in fintech companies, and we were building and deploying market data systems and financial markets trading systems. And we believed when we founded the company that traditional B2C commerce would increasingly move online, and that the most efficient markets would be driven by real-time systems delivering optimized, personalized experiences, all backed up by economically driven analytics and insights. So we believe that the experiences we gain in financial trading markets would become relevant to online B2C commerce, and that's really why we founded the company.
Yeah, and so maybe for those of us who are not in that world, really tangibly nuts and bolts, what does Fanplayr do?
The Fanplayr products starts with our patented segmentation engine, and we have global patents for segmentation as a service. And it's the only truly global real-time platform that's designed to enhance business performance for our customers. We do this by making data actionable through AI-driven personalisation. And the objective for our customers is to improve efficiency and to increase their revenue and ultimately to optimize customer lifetime value. So how we do that, as I mentioned earlier, is leveraging first-party data. And we enable businesses to collect, process, and analyze real-time first-party behavioural data. And that enables our customers to build high-precision segmentation, optimize performance, and execute data-driven targeting strategies. That results in personalised on-site experiences, which we provide by enhancing user interactions, by harnessing the power of data and using AI. And through that, we deliver real-time personalized messages and experiences to users, both in real time, on-site, and using messaging off-site subsequent to their visits. The objective is to enhance shopper engagement, and we do that, as I mentioned, across the site, our customers' websites, through tailored real-time experiences, and through omni-channel messaging. Now, a product that I believe should be relevant and interesting to your viewers is how we use AI to power merchandising. So when I say merchandising, what I mean is essentially recommendations that are personalized to end users. And we have been using AI and machine learning for several years now to allow our customers to intelligently display products to their end users with the objective of ensuring they reach the right user at the right time. And the objective of that is to increase purchase propensity while providing in-depth reporting. And ultimately, we look for our clients to increase their average order values, and that has an impact, positive impact on their revenue growth. Now, the particular AI products that we take to market are product recommendations, where we use AI to power suggestions to end users using algorithms like Others You May Like, frequently bought together and recommended for you. And that helps their end users discover the most relevant products and also to increase purchase likelihood. We also have other merchandising products, which we call product lists and rankings, which are machine learning driven, that allows merchants to show lists of products that are most relevant to each user. So those lists can be based around categories. They could be lists like most popular, most recently seen, most purchased, seasonal recommendations. So essentially, our customers can combine the AI algorithmic recommendations with those machine learning product lists. And quite recently, we brought out an entirely new product, which we call Personal Shopper, which is really a game-changing AI solution that is driven around the concept of a personal shopper in, say, a high-end department store. How do you bring that experience to the real world and make it accessible to every online shopper? So that's something we're pretty excited by, and we have customers using that currently. We first launched with a big fashion chain in Japan. Our other products include a privacy-first cookieless solution called Privacy ID, which is focused around enhancing user identification in the cookieless environment that we're increasingly moving towards. And we also have a customer data platform we call Fanplayr 360. So I hope you forgive the long speech, but over the years we've built quite a range of products.
No, that's fantastic to see those real world examples. And I think it's one of the things that I often talk about if I'm at a conference or doing a keynote is this shift that we've really seen in that companies have been using AI for decades to personalize, to segment, to kind of enhance the online user experience. And you're obviously experts in that. This big chat GPT or generative AI shift that has happened in the last 2 years, and suddenly everybody has AI at their fingertips. How's that changed what you're doing and maybe even how people are relating to your products now that they've got more user experience themselves with AI?
It certainly generated a lot of experience and awareness. And as you say, many people and companies are using AI through ChatGPT and the other similar engines. In practice, I think it's helpful to understand what ChatGPT really is, which is a large language model and is only as smart as the information that's in it. And obviously the learning that is increasingly generated through use and feedback. But so I think it is important to understand what exactly you're dealing with. It isn't, the future of, a magical AI being that is all thinking and all knowing can outsmart humans. It's an LLM model that is getting increasingly better. But I think from a Silicon Valley perspective, what people are coming up against as they use these LLM models is the realization that the growth in the value generated through these AI engines is not necessarily continually exponential. So it's a bit more like an S-curve where you get towards the top of the S-curve, then you need to figure out, what's the next S-curve that can take one somewhat higher. And I think people are also realizing that the importance of human interpretation and intervention and tuning how AI models are used is incredibly important. And that's something that's very hard to automate away. So I think, in 5 years' time, the world will be dramatically different, but it is important, I think, to understand where we are today and, what's going on.
Yeah, and I think, I've been working in marketing for 15 years and particularly online marketing. And so this concept of segmentation and using data to really serve customers or serve users in their online experience, super powerful. And historically, it's often raised a lot of eyebrows. People feel really creeped out if suddenly they're talking about something and then it shows up in their Facebook feeds. So how do you, when it comes to all the concepts which people are becoming much more conscious around data privacy, how do you kind of walk that balance or find the right balance about really tailoring content and creating that hyper-personalised experience without creeping people out?
It's certainly a very fine line. And I think we've all had the experience of searching for a product online, say, for example, a pair of riding boots, for example. You leave that, move on to something else, and suddenly the riding boots are following you all around the internet. And it's kind of creepy. And it's even more creepy when you've been talking to somebody, either voice or chat, about riding boots, and suddenly the riding boots appear. So it is definitely a balance between creepiness and making people feel their privacy has been invaded versus providing a convenience that people like and, come to rely on. And I think certainly in the US, people are pretty addicted to Amazon, which has been a pioneer in this area. And I'm always looking at their recommendations. I'm always looking at things that are recommended based on what I've looked at or what I've bought previously, because it's just kind of super helpful. So I don't mind giving up an element of privacy for convenience if I don't feel I'm being abused. So I think it's treading that fine line between being helpful and not being abusive. And personally, I do think the riding boots following you around the internet is falling more in the latter category than the former, even though it happens. One thing that we have done is, bearing in mind our clients are businesses who typically sell online, whether it's retail, travel, could be insurance, banking, but they're using the internet to sell online. And as time has gone on, Apple and Firefox have cracked down on privacy. GDPR has come out, everyone's taking it more seriously. So we developed a product called Privacy ID that I mentioned earlier, which complies with privacy rules, but still allows businesses to identify returning users in a way that doesn't compromise privacy. So you can think of it as, I come back to a site using Privacy ID. I don't necessarily need to be identified as Simon, but maybe user ABC123, and that identifier can then show me content that I might like or is relevant. Equally, we found quite recently in Europe that a number of our large customers are reacting to recent GDPR changes, which require even more transient storage of data. But you still want those customers to be able to segment and personalize. And so we've actually developed quite recently this concept of transient sessions where for particular customers, we can actually give them the ability to say, user sessions are only valid for a day or some particular period. Thereafter, they're gone, but still retaining a number of the indicators that they can still use those indicators for future personalisation. So it's catering the product and the technology for the evolving rules of privacy.
Yeah, it's interesting. I haven't always been very popular for my views on privacy. I mean, I obviously in social media marketing realized really early that, as everybody says now, either you pay for the product or you are the product. And so we've been paying for years with our data for convenience. And I would much rather see ads for high heel shoes than riding boots. So I'm all for the, that personalization of content and certainly of experience. It does strike me, though, that I think as people become more familiar with AI and interacting with large language models who do get to know them and who do serve them in ways that really work for them, that this concept of data privacy will shift and change over time, and that people will really more embrace that feeling of, this is actually for my benefit, not being used against me. But I think, it always is a fine line between consumer benefit and corporate benefit, one that I imagine that you walk on a regular basis. And so you mentioned GDPR, and one of the things I'm really fascinated in at the moment is the differences in how particularly the EU and the US are approaching AI and the development of this technology. And, the Safety Act, the EU Safety Act has got far more rigorous boundaries and guidelines than what's happening in most of the rest of the world. Do you see that certain regions are going to advance in this kind of technology a lot more than others based on some of the regulatory environment?
Yes, I think it will definitely become more and more difficult in Europe for those reasons. And I think typically the US has benefited from relaxed business regulation to drive a lot of the technology innovation. Having said that, being based in California, the Californian rules have tended to follow EU standards. So we pretty much, if we, in our company, take it, we need to be aware of GDPR. And if we do that, then we're complying with the Californian rules. So, but I think you've raised a very good point, and that will be interesting to see how that plays out over the next couple of years.
I think a huge amount in your world is definitely going to change as the AI focus, which is very intense at the moment, evolves. Yeah. And
just to give you an example, which is super interesting, one of my other companies where I'm an investor and on the board, I'm actually chairman, they work in the property tech or construction tech industry. It's actually a company based in Melbourne called MatTrack. But the way that they are using AI is actually pretty incredible. And they, when I say they, we, in my role at that company, are ingesting large amounts of construction documentation, and by our customers getting all their suppliers and all their subcontractors just to forward by email all the documents as they're constantly being updated and evolved on a project to one of the company email addresses at MatTrack. Then the MatTrack engine ingests all those documents and can put the documents in the right place on all the relevant projects. And then what they can actually show in a dashboard is an incredible real-time display of what exactly is going on every project, where all the hotspots are, where things are running behind, who needs to be contacted. And that's all driven by AI. So it's actually pretty incredible what you can do with the AI technology these days.
And I imagine that's applicable in a lot of industries. So extrapolating that out over to other industries, I imagine would be potentially next on the roadmap as well. Those
Exactly.
sort of interactive AI real-time analysis of what's happening is really incredible.
If I may reflect a little on how Fanplayr came to use AI in the first place, because it does actually relate to some of your earlier comments, Kate, about segmentation and personalisation. So for us, it's been a step in the journey, and where we started from is the understanding that for businesses to get better online performance, it comes down to user engagement. And if you don't engage well with your users, they can't find the right content, they tend to leave or to abandon a transaction. And I've always liked the concept that consumers have the attention span of a goldfish. And so that's really where we started from. And so really, in the early days, the concept was segmentation, online personalisation. And that definitely has had a really marked effect on user engagement that then drives conversion rates, revenue, sales, customer loyalty. But as I mentioned earlier, a few years ago, we started using AI to provide product recommendations. And that really opened our eyes to the power of AI, because what we found is that the performance that our customers saw using AI was miles better than traditional product recommendation software. And you could see it in practice when you look at the way the AI works for some of our clients, where particularly, say, in retail, where you're looking at maybe children's clothing, and you look at, well, what are the AI recommendations the software's making? And some are kind of obvious. You look at the recommendations and say, oh, they're recommending a top that matches that bottom. That makes sense, right? Or they're recommending something that kind of looks similar, or maybe the same brand or style. That makes sense. But then you also see recommendations, you think, how on earth did it come up with that? It's unrelated. But no, it actually works because the software's figured it out that other people like that particular type of clothing. They also bought this. So it really was an eye-opener. And that meant, from Fanplayr's standpoint, that we see our future in this business is really extending AI right through our entire product.
Yeah, and it was one of the first things as I started to, as a consumer, a business owner consumer, started to get excited about, with that background in hyper-personalisation of content, was exactly as you're saying, that it wasn't just product recommendations or content that is a natural 1 + 1 = 2. But
Yeah.
it was, if this is a mother of a 3-year-old girl, she's likely to be interested also in bubbles or, you know, a raincoat because she lives in Australia, or whatever that is. That I think generative AI in particular can join dots that are well beyond what can just be programmed. Because I think that's probably the big shift that's happened is you've got what you can program, and it's like if they're interested in A, they're also interested in B and C. But generative AI can go, if they're interested in A, then M and Z are also of interest because of these 10 other data points that maybe, you know, it's not programmed to do. So
Right.
is that a correct analysis? Because that's what I'm starting to see happen is that, and I think a lot of people when they first have that chat GPT moment are like, whoa, what just happened? It's not just another shiny object or another little piece of, you know, software or tech that we're using. It's fundamentally different to what we've been experiencing up
It
until
is.
now.
I mean, what? Just a personal moment for me over here. My daughter works for Google, or she worked for Google. She now works for LinkedIn, but she's fairly senior in their management, kind of director level. And one day when she was working at Google, she said, "Oh, what do you think about ChatGPT?" And she started to explain that Google was concerned that it could really threaten their very existence and transform the way that people search. Because I'm sure a lot of your viewers, even right now, would consider going to ChatGPT rather than typing something into Google, even though Google have their own AI tech now built into their search engine. But it's certainly several years ago when it really emerged, set some huge paranoia going amongst the large tech companies for very good reason, I think.
Well, it fundamentally shifts a lot of the models that many, many large entities are built on.
True.
And with Google, I mean, if people are paying for their content to be seen, and that's their, you know, the basis of their financial model, then it significantly shifts that. And given that you've raised that, I mean, it's a topic that I'm really interested in, is this shift from search engine optimization, so how people find things by searching, through
True.
to the answer engine or AI engine optimization, where often what AI is doing is, and I'm saying this for people listening, not for you, because I know you're all across this, but they're summarizing large amounts of data for an answer and not necessarily pointing to individual data sources. And so we're starting to work with clients around how do you ensure that you're being surfaced in these AI engines and not just in search engines. But I mean, Google is definitely AI-ifying its platform and bringing in, you know, AI summaries, and that just this week they've dropped a ton of new features in Gemini, and there's so much happening in that space. So there's this constant race. But, you know, there are platforms like Perplexity. It has gone quite deep on shopping and product recommendations, but that happens in a very different way to how Google's been doing that. So from a Fanplayr perspective, how are you taking that into account in terms of how people even find these websites before you start making recommendations and using that user experience? Are you focused at all on that aspect?
No, we haven't traditionally worked in the area of aggregation or driving traffic, if that makes sense. We've really focused on people owning a website, owning an app, and how they optimize those venues. But I do think increasingly the way you drive traffic to a website, the way you appear in an AI engine is going to become very important.
And I'm not sure anyone's got real answers on that yet. I think a lot of that is evolving, and it's evolving so quickly. And so much of this reminds me back to the early days of social media. You know, Google was the search engine, and then they started into social media with Google Plus and and Facebook was very social media, but then became quite search driven and became very, and so I think we're seeing a lot of that with the AI platforms as well, that they get really good at one thing, but then it's like, oh, what about this other area over here that we really need to start integrating? So as you look ahead at that sort of intersection of AI and e-commerce, what are some of the things that companies and businesses need to be considering now to make sure they get it right as we go through what is a fairly significant shift in how we do business online?
I think there's a lot of need to actually pay attention to the detail about how you implement things to actually make them work properly. And perhaps I could quickly just explain some of the history about how we first implemented AI and what went wrong and how we fixed it. And so the foremost common AI models for product recommendations are others you may like, recommended for you, frequently brought together, and recently viewed. Sounds simple, but what are the difficulties involved with actually implementing that using the AI? Well, one, you need time to train the models because the model is only as good as the time you can put into using real data to actually train it. You need to schedule regular updates to the models to keep training them as the data changes, as people's behaviour changes, as products change. There's also quite a high cost in running AI technology. So again, this is an example of you really have to have a good understanding and a proper plan to how you implement, because depending how you run the AI tech, how frequently you update the data, there can be a huge IT cost that's associated with that. Then we found that, well, you need to actually have up-to-date product catalogs, because if it's not up to date, then you don't want to recommend a product that maybe it's out of stock or they don't have that color or size. So it's got to be up to date. So how do you build the infrastructure to make sure they're constantly kept up to date? And then, all right, so let's say you have all that working, then you need to have a really good dynamic display in real time to the end users. That sounds simple, but it's not actually necessarily simple. You need to put the tech together to enable that. So, yeah, I mean, there are lots of different examples, but I think your viewers will find that when you actually come to implement, there's a lot of devil in the detail of how you actually do that, cost involved. It's not all just, wave a magic wand.
Yeah, although some of the front-end consumer platforms make it look a bit that way. There's a lot that goes into the back end to make it look so simple. So, Simon, as you look ahead, and I often say at the end of these podcasts, as you're standing on the hill and looking ahead, and it used to be that we could see sort of 5 to 10 years down the line. Now we're lucky if we can see 5 to 10 months down the line. But what are you most excited about in maybe not just Fanplayr, but all the companies that you're involved with in terms of this technological shift that we're going through right now, with AI becoming much more mainstream and available to consumers? What are you most excited about in the business landscape about what AI is bringing to us?
I do think that we're in the early days of a real tech revolution, and that over time it's going to transform business in ways that we can't even expect or anticipate today. It's pretty exciting. And when you listen to investors, and I'm thinking about both Australian and Silicon Valley VC investors, they see now as one of the most incredibly exciting times to invest because of the value and innovation that is being generated around the AI technology. So I'm excited by that opportunity, and I think that there's a lot of great things to come, both from the investment standpoint, but also in technology. So I think your podcast is incredibly timely, and I'm sure will gain a huge amount of interest going forward for that reason.
Well, there are so many issues that we're grappling with, I guess, as we go, as we go through this time. Just listening to what you were saying, though, having been through the .com bubble, is there any concern that this is another bubble, or does this? I mean, to me, this feels fundamentally different to that. How is that for you?
Yeah, it does feel fundamentally different, but also similar in that if you actually think about the .com bubble, Amazon emerged out of the .com bubble. At the time of the .com bubble, there was a public company called Webvan that was doing home delivery of groceries. They went out of business, but guess what? Today, that's a big thing, home delivery of groceries. So, I do think that investors tend to have a herd instinct, and you get a lot of people piling into things, suddenly go out of favour. And you find that people following the herd will invest in companies that maybe aren't the best investment, or they find they're over-investing in certain things. But because I really think that AI will be just as transformative as the internet was in the .com era, or even more, that although there may be overinvestment at times in certain aspects of the AI, I see it having a very long future.
I was in wrap-up mode, but I've got two more questions, Simon, that have just come out of this last part of our conversation. One that I keep grappling with myself is this concept of SaaS products, licensing, paying per seat. I'm undergoing a big negotiation on behalf of a client at the moment around a big platform that charges an extraordinary amount of money. And what I'm starting to see is with new AI driven platforms, with you've got platforms now where you can build your own software and you can say, I want a bit of this and I want a bit of that and I want it to do. And so how is that going to fundamentally shift, I guess, segments or parts of the industry that have built huge businesses around the SaaS product licensing model? And have you got some insight into how AI is going to change that?
I do think it's going to change it in the way you've mentioned. And certainly certain industries that have become very entrenched and expensive will be prime targets. But
What was interesting seeing Salesforce shift to Agentforce, right? They've jumped on really quickly and gone, okay, we've got a Salesforce, now let's really focus in on this AI agent side of things.
I mean, it was brought home to me in a Matrac meeting yesterday where the team was showing me the latest in their AI technology for showing real-time detailed updates about traffic light type signals on major projects. And they said, here's what metric shows. And it's all driven by AI technology. And it was like an incredible immersive chart, color detailed, but bringing out immediate hot action points if you're the CEO of a large construction company. And they said, by the way, here's what, I'm not going to name the company, but a large multi-billion-dollar company shows. And it was like static lines with no detail. And it makes me realize this AI can transform certain industries, and I think it will.
Yeah, I think there's massive disruption to some of those more what we now see as traditional, even though 10 or 15 years ago they were the innovators.
Right.
And the other question that came out of what you were just saying is this concept, I guess, of building a moat around a business. So we are seeing a proliferation of new companies, new platforms that are really just, they're building on top of these AI platforms. But it also strikes me that potentially 90% of those won't exist in 12 to 15 months' time, because all they're doing is building on top of something, and they really have no defensibility around whatever it is that they're offering. How do you see that changing? Because that to me is probably where the bubble is these companies that are springing up but not actually developing in a way that is going to give them sustainability long term.
I think that's very astute. And I think if you're looking at where people have overinvested in AI, it's investing in companies like that. If I could just say, your description of what has been happening and where the risk area is, I totally agree with. And there have been quite a few companies like that, and a lot of companies like that have taken money and won't be around, because where's the value really?
Well, and with platforms now, and you can code anything without being a coder or a developer. So, you see something and you go, yeah, I want to do that myself. And you hop onto Windsurfer or Replit or any of and you build your own. And so I think it'll be fascinating to see what happens over the next few years, and how it changes, how businesses start up and whether they become sustainable or not.
It is fascinating, and I think it's quite exciting, and it's been a real pleasure talking to you.
Thank you so much, Simon, for your time. I've really enjoyed our conversation.
Likewise, Kate. Great. Thank you.
Thank you for tuning in to the AI Grapple. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with your friends and colleagues and subscribe on your favourite podcast platform. We would love to hear your thoughts, so reach out with any questions or comments about the show. Until next time, keep grappling with AI and stay curious.